One would think that being born into one of the most noble and prestigious families in the glorious Marcosian Empire would have been nice and cushy. And it was, or at least I thought it would be. Starting my days with a good book, fresh off the printer, the servants calling me down to breakfast with the family. Ah, family breakfast. Father always pushing me to learn the art of the sword, like all the other boys my age. Nagging and nagging me about how the others would go and train and I would merely watch. The pen is mightier than the sword, father, I would say. But in actual practice, having to defend yourself against your hulking man of a father with an actual sword, whilst using only a pen, is quite, well, not optimal to say the least. After the series of unfortunate events, my mother sent me into town to buy healing medicines to treat my wounds. That's when I saw the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. Just a few blocks from the tincture shop, where I was quite well known by the owner, on a first-name basis, actually. Yes, who would have thought that I would be beaten as much as a child, a teenager, and even into my adulthood. Anyway, yes, the most beautiful and curious of sights, a cart that was selling books. I'd never seen anything like it before. The couple selling them were dressed in the most unique moss-colored cloaks. They had the oddest names as well. A father, not my own dear papa, and, well, mother, obviously not my mother either. On visiting the establishment on wheels and perusing their wares, I kept asking them if they heard the strange mutterings. Like 1,000 children, whispering about nothing and everything at the same time, I said. The man, a father, again, not my father, seemed in shock at first, and mother, well, she was awkwardly excited. She told me that she wanted to show me something. She led me into the basement of the cart, which in hindsight should have raised at least a few flags of various shades of red, but behind a large bookshelf lay a door, and she took me down. And who would have thought that carts would have basements, right? Ah, the wonders of magic. But I digress. She led me down the steps, the whole time telling me about a book that had no words and no pictures. And the most peculiar thing about it was that when anyone attempted to write in it, the book would just drink up the inks, leaving the pages barren once again. The whispering voices grew louder as we reached the landing of a large, dull room, which appeared to simply have a podium that held one singular book. When Mother handed the book to me, the whispers stopped in an instant. And when I continued to open the book, its pages began filling with words, images, and even what appeared to be mathematical notations. And as I flipped through the pages, something within me whispered to my soul that this book must be mine, and after a small amount of wheeling and dealing with my exceptional people skills, I managed to talk it down to a mere 100 gold pieces, which, well, was exactly how much my mother had given me for the healing potions. Little to say, I was going to get a mouthful from my mother and a few fistfuls from my father when I returned home. But, to my surprise, not a word was uttered when I returned home that evening. But, hells, I wished I would have had something to say before the events of the next morning. Obviously, I didn't sleep that night. I stayed up, losing time in what felt like months and months, reading tale after tale. By the time I had found myself again, it had to have been at least noon the next day. But no one had called me down for breakfast, which was quite peculiar to say the least. As I made my way downstairs, I was met with the odd surprise of mother and father. Not my own mother and father, but the roaming salespeople, sitting around the table with, well, my own mother and father. My father, with the most peculiar smug grin, told me that an arrangement had been made, and that I had been sold for the price of one singular donkey. He said something about one jackass for another, but this one would actually pull its own weight. They didn't allow me to take any of my things, however, father, not my own father, made a point to demand that I get my new book and bring it with me. As I left with what I'd eventually find to be my new family, my new father, patted me on the head with a grin. He told me that I would be meeting my new brother soon, and that the book would be instrumental in my daily task. As I climbed to the back of the cart, Mother led me to yet another secret room, which would be understatement to say that it was much larger on the inside. She sat me down next to a cell of sorts, very makeshift-like, and nodded to a young boy. He was in shackles and looked, well, quite dingy. She told me his name was Jack and that I was to read him a story or two to keep him calm on the way home. She more demanded, really, but anyway, she made her way back to the door she had just let me through. Leaving us both alone in a dimly lit room in silence was just a bit awkward after the short introduction. I tried to break the silence with a line that I'd learned from a book I had recently read. What are you in for? I asked him, but after a few moments, the silence was broken with new mutterings from my book. As I opened it, the pages filled once more and contained a mere 2 sentences. As I read them aloud, the words said, Jack and Jill went up the hill to fetch a pail of water. When Jack came down, Jill was nowhere to be found, but something had tainted the well water. Oh no, what have I gotten myself into?